What if I told you that the man who claimed he slept with nearly 5,000 women is now facing consequences that go way beyond his wild rock star reputation? What if I told you that Gene Simmons, the fire-breathing demon of Kiss, has secrets that would shock even his most dedicated fans? Today, we're diving deep into the latest headlines about Gene Simmons, and trust me, this story has more twists than a roller coaster. But before we get to the shocking recent events, we need to understand how a poor immigrant boy became one of the most controversial figures in rock history. Because the truth is, Gene Simmons wasn't always Gene Simmons, and his journey from poverty to fame is filled with pain, determination, and choices that would change everything. Picture this. It's 1949, and a baby boy is born in Israel to parents who barely escaped the horrors of World War II. His mother, Flora, had survived Nazi concentration camps where she watched her own mother die. His father had also fled Hungary, carrying trauma that would never fully heal. They named their son Heimwitz, and from the moment he took his first breath, his life was shaped by survival. When Heim was just 6 years old, his parents' marriage fell apart. Money was tight. Hope was scarce, and his father stayed behind when his mother made the brave decision to start over. Flora packed up what little they had and moved to America with her young son. They arrived in Queens, New York with no money, no English, and no family waiting for them. Can you imagine being 8 years old, not speaking a language, and watching your mother work 15 hours a day in factories just to keep you alive? That's exactly what happened to the boy who would become Gene Simmons. Flora sewed buttons and worked until her hands bled, while little Heim, who now called himself Eugene, learned to take care of himself. Kids at school made fun of his accent. They bullied him for being different. But instead of breaking him down, every insult made him stronger. He sold cactuses door to door. He picked fruit and sold it on street corners, just like he had done back in Israel. Every rejection, every cruel comment, it all fueled a fire inside him that would never go out. By the time he was 9, he had legally changed his name again, this time to Gene Klein. He picked Gene after cowboy actors like Gene Autry because he wanted to be as American as possible. He fell in love with television, especially when the Beatles appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. Something inside him lit up like a firework. He wanted that life. He wanted the fame, the stage, the feeling of being somebody important. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Gene started learning guitar and formed little bands while still in school. He worked in butcher shops during the day, slicing meat for just over $1 an hour. He saved every penny because poverty had taught him to count every cent. While other teenagers were getting drunk at parties, Gene stayed sharp and sober. He said it himself later, that's how he got girls. He used his clarity while everyone else lost theirs. In 1970, Gene teamed up with Paul Stanley and formed a band called Wicked Lester. They recorded a full album at the same studio where Jimi Hendrix had worked, but their record company hated it. They called the sound too messy and shelved it forever. That rejection hit Gene like a punch to the gut, but it also lit a fire that would create something legendary. By January 1973, Gene and Paul had given up on compromise. They found Peter Criss through a Rolling Stone ad and Ace Frehley through the Village Voice. Together, these 4 men created something the world had never seen before. This wasn't going to be just another rock band. This was going to be a wild, over-the-top show with makeup, fire, and pure fantasy. Their first show was at a tiny club in Queens. Only 3 people showed up, and some of them were girlfriends of the band members. But that night, Gene breathed fire on stage for the first time. It was a spectacle nobody would ever forget. Without a single hit song or any time on MTV, they started building a following one person at a time. Gene created his demon character, painting bat wings around his eyes and spitting blood on stage. He had learned the fire-breathing tricks from professionals, and every night he turned his childhood pain into raw power. The makeup wasn't planned. They just stood in front of mirrors, painting wildly, trying to create something nobody had ever seen. Their early shows barely drew a dozen people, but those few people left talking. Even without the internet, word spread like wildfire. Gene said the makeup felt sticky and strange, but it was working. They didn't need radio hits. They just needed to be unforgettable. In August 1973, a manager named Bill O'Coin saw Kiss play and promised to get them a record deal within 2 weeks. He kept his promise. By November, they had signed with Casablanca Records. The band was so excited that Peter Criss literally fell off his platform shoes when he heard the news. They recorded their first album and released it in February 1974. Sales were slow at first, only 75,000 copies. But the band didn't stop. They played over 300 shows that year. Gene called it a gamble that turned them into legends. But here's where Gene's story takes a dark turn. During those early years, he developed a disturbing habit. He began taking Polaroid photos of his sexual encounters with women. Each woman had to hold up a hotel room key as proof. Over the years, he claimed to have taken nearly 5,000 of these photos, boasting that he had slept with more than 4,600 women. Grace Slick from Jefferson Airplane called it disgusting when she saw the photos. Gene kept them all locked in a box like twisted trophies. This wasn't just rock star behavior. This was something deeper and more troubling. His sex addiction became part of his wild persona, but it would come back to haunt him in ways he never expected. Everything changed in September 1975 when Kiss released their live album called Alive. It captured the madness of their shows, the fire, the screams, the blood. The album went quadruple platinum, selling over 4 million copies. It reached number 9 on the Billboard charts and stayed there for 110 weeks. Suddenly, they weren't just a strange band with makeup. They were the future of rock music. Their success saved their record company from bankruptcy and proved that their wild approach was working. The makeup, the fire, the madness, it all made perfect sense. But success came with a price. By the late 1970s, cracks were showing in the band. Peter Criss was struggling with drug addiction. He started sabotaging shows, stopping his drumming mid-performance just to lash out. Gene called it self-destruction, and by 1979, it was clear the original band was falling apart. In 1978, they did something that shocked everyone. NBC aired a bizarre TV movie called Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. The same people who made Scooby-Doo produced it. Kiss played themselves as superheroes battling an evil inventor in a theme park. The acting was terrible and fans hated it, but Gene loved the attention. That same year, all 4 members released solo albums. Gene's record outsold some of Kiss's actual group albums, which showed just how big his ego had become. Meanwhile, the band released Dynasty with disco influences that hurt their image. Rock fans walked away, and ticket sales collapsed. On September 18, 1983, Kiss did the unthinkable. They took off their makeup live on MTV. After 10 years of mystery, they revealed their real faces to the world. At the same time, they released Lick It Up, which went platinum with over 1 million copies sold. The gamble worked. Sales jumped and fans came back. But Gene's personal life was becoming more complicated. In his 2001 autobiography, he revealed the full truth about his sexual conquests. He wrote about sleeping with over 4,800 women during his time in the band. One of the wildest stories involved dating Cher between 1979 and 1980, but then falling for her best friend, Diana Ross. The scandal blew up in People magazine and became one of the most famous betrayals in rock history. Here's where things get really interesting. In 1983, Gene met Shannon Tweed at the Playboy Mansion. Shannon had been named Playmate of the Year in 1982, and she entered Gene's world knowing exactly what his reputation was. They had 2 children together, Nick in 1989 and Sophie in 1992, but Gene refused to marry her for 28 years. From 2006 to 2012, they starred in a reality show called Gene Simmons' Family Jewels. The show gave fans a front-row seat into his home life and became a huge hit, but it also revealed the cracks in their relationship. Shannon had to deal with Gene's continued affairs and his collection of those disturbing Polaroid photos. The turning point came in 2011 when Shannon found Gene's collection of explicit photos and burned them live on television. That moment shocked fans and seemed to wake Gene up to what he was losing. After 28 years of avoiding marriage, he finally proposed to Shannon in Belize, and they got married on October 1st, 2011. But Gene's troubles were far from over. In 2010, He was sued by an ESPN makeup artist who claimed he behaved inappropriately during a SportsCenter appearance. In 2016, a dishwasher at his restaurant accused him of groping her. Another woman made similar claims in 2017. Though Gene denied these accusations and the cases were settled, they painted a troubling pattern of behavior. In 2017, Gene went too far when he tried to trademark the famous devil horns hand gesture, claiming he invented it in 1974. The backlash was instant and furious. Metal fans reminded him that people like John Lennon and Ronnie James Dio had been using the gesture long before Kiss existed. Gene dropped the trademark attempt within days, but the damage to his reputation was done. Gene's family wasn't spared from controversy either. In 2010, his son Nick got into serious trouble over his comic book Incarnate, which was accused of stealing artwork from a Japanese manga called Bleach. Fans showed exact panel comparisons, and the evidence was overwhelming. The publisher pulled the comic, and Nick was forced to apologize, but the damage to his credibility was permanent. In 2018, Gene's tough exterior cracked when his mother Flora passed away at age 93. She was a Holocaust survivor who had raised him alone after immigrating to America. Gene broke down on Instagram, calling her his moral compass and urging people to cherish their mothers. For once, fans saw Gene without any masks, just a son mourning the loss of the woman who had shaped his entire life. Now let's talk about what's been making headlines recently. In 2024, Gene made comments about female dancers on Dancing with the Stars that many people call creepy and inappropriate. Instead of focusing on the performances, he kept talking about how beautiful they looked. One comment about a dancer fogging up his glasses went viral for all the wrong reasons. Social media exploded with criticism, calling him the gross uncle that nobody wants at family gatherings. People demanded that ABC apologize for giving him a platform. But Gene didn't back down. In an interview, he said he stood by every word, showing that he still doesn't understand why his behavior makes people uncomfortable. Then came something that shocked even Gene's harshest critics. In April 2025, he launched a fan package that cost $12,495, not including the concert ticket. For that outrageous price, fans could act as his roadie for a day, help with soundcheck, eat backstage, and receive a signed bass guitar. Critics tore the package apart, calling it shameless and tone-deaf, especially during tough economic times when people are struggling to pay their bills. But here's the shocking part: the package sold out. One fan, a retired soldier, paid for the experience and said it was worth every penny. This showed that despite all the controversy, Gene still has devoted fans willing to pay anything to be close to him. The controversy reached a new level in August 2025 when President Trump announced that Kiss would receive the Kennedy Center honors. This was shocking because just 3 years earlier, Gene had blasted Trump in interviews, calling him abhorrent for spreading hate. After January 6, he even compared Trump's rise to cockroaches coming out of the walls. But now, the band was accepting an award from the same man Gene had criticized so harshly. The internet exploded with memes and accusations of hypocrisy. Gene didn't comment on the controversy, but his silence spoke volumes about how much his principles could change when fame and recognition were on the line. In 2025, Gene also took his solo act on the road again. At the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally in August, he performed without the usual Kiss armor, telling stories from his 50-year career. But fans weren't happy about the ticket prices, with some costing over $500. By March, several dates had been canceled due to low sales, showing that even Gene's most loyal fans had limits on what they'd pay. When Ozzy Osbourne died in July 2025, Gene showed a different side during an emotional interview on CBS Mornings. He remembered how Kiss had opened for Black Sabbath in 1975 and spoke about Ozzy as a genuine soul. He even revealed that Kiss had once turned down a major tour with Sabbath in the 70s because of their heavy drug use. Gene wanted to keep his band's image clean, which stunned fans who knew about his own controversial behavior. So what does all of this mean for Gene Simmons today? At 76 years old, he's worth more than $400 million, but his legacy is more complicated than ever. He's a man who survived poverty and built an empire, but he's also someone whose behavior toward women has been consistently problematic. The recent headlines show a pattern that goes back decades. From the disturbing Polaroid collection to the lawsuits from female employees, from the inappropriate comments on national television to the outrageous fan packages, Gene seems unable or unwilling to change his ways. His marriage to Shannon appears to have stabilized some aspects of his personal life, but his public behavior continues to generate controversy. The trademark attempt for the devil horns gesture showed his ego remains as large as ever, while his acceptance of the Kennedy Center honors, despite his previous criticism of Trump, revealed a willingness to compromise his stated principles for recognition. What makes Gene's story so fascinating is the contradiction at its heart. This is a man who survived the Holocaust's aftermath, who worked his way out of poverty through sheer determination, who created one of the most successful rock bands in history. But it's also a man whose treatment of women and obsession with money have consistently overshadowed his achievements. The reality show with his family showed moments of genuine vulnerability, especially around his mother's death and his eventual marriage to Shannon. But these moments of humanity seem to be exceptions rather than the rule. Even in his 70s, Gene continues to prioritize profit over people, charging outrageous amounts for fan experiences while making inappropriate comments about women. Perhaps most telling is how Gene's own family has been affected by his choices. His son's plagiarism scandal, while ultimately Nick's responsibility, happened in the shadow of his father's controversial reputation. Shannon's decision to burn those Polaroid photos on television was clearly a desperate attempt to draw a line under that chapter of their lives. The latest headlines about Gene Simmons reveal a man who has never truly reckoned with the consequences of his behavior. Despite decades of criticism, multiple lawsuits, and public backlash, he continues to act as if the rules don't apply to him. His wealth and fame have insulated him from many consequences, but they haven't protected his reputation. As Kiss moves toward the end of their farewell tour, Gene's legacy remains deeply complicated. There's no denying his impact on rock music and popular culture. The makeup, the fire, the spectacle, it all influenced countless bands and changed what was possible in live performance. Kiss sold over 100 million albums and created a merchandising empire that generates money to this day. But there's also no denying the darker aspects of the story. The objectification of women, the disturbing photo collection, the pattern of inappropriate behavior, the lawsuits and settlements. These aren't just tabloid rumors. They're documented patterns that span decades. The most recent controversies, from the Dancing with the Stars comments to the $12,000 fan package, show that age hasn't brought wisdom or humility. If anything, Gene seems more detached from reality than ever, unable to understand why people find his behavior problematic. What's particularly sad is how his mother's story of survival and strength seems to have taught him the wrong lessons. Flora Klein survived the Holocaust, raised her son alone in a foreign country, and worked multiple jobs to give him opportunities. Her story should have taught Gene about resilience, compassion, and the value of treating people with dignity. Instead, Gene seems to have learned that survival means taking whatever you can get, regardless of who gets hurt along the way. His wealth and success became tools for exploitation rather than platforms for positive change. Even his charitable work feels calculated rather than genuine, more about image management than actual giving. The headlines breaking today about Gene Simmons tell the story of a man who achieved everything he thought he wanted but lost something essential along the way. His journey from poor immigrant to rock legend is remarkable, but it's overshadowed by choices that revealed his character. As fans and critics continue to debate his legacy, one thing remains clear. Gene Simmons created an image so powerful that it overshadowed the human being underneath. The demon makeup became a mask he could never fully remove, even when the cameras were rolling in his own home. The latest controversy suggests that this pattern isn't changing anytime soon. At an age when most people are reflecting on their lives and trying to make peace with their choices, Gene seems determined to double down on the behavior that has defined him for decades. Whether this is the real Gene Simmons or just another performance is a question that may never be answered. What we do know is that the headlines will keep coming, because Gene Simmons has never learned how to exist without controversy. For better or worse, that might be the most honest thing about him. The story of Gene Simmons is far from over, and if recent events are any indication, the most shocking chapters may still be ahead. His ability to generate headlines, even negative ones, remains as strong as ever. The question is whether his legacy will be remembered for the music and spectacle, or for the pattern of behavior that has consistently overshadowed his achievements. What do you think about Gene Simmons and these latest controversies? Has he gone too far, or is this just another chapter in a career built on pushing boundaries? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if this video opened your eyes to something new about one of rock's most controversial figures. Make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the stories behind the headlines. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.